Okay, good evening, students. In the morning class, we have discussed about adrenal cortex and the hormones secreted by the cortex of adrenal gland, namely mineralocorticoids, glucocorticoids, and sex corticoids, and the disorders related to that. Now we are going to discuss about adrenal medulla and the hormones associated with it. Coming to the adrenal medulla is nothing but the innermost part of the adrenal gland. So adrenal gland has an outer capsule followed by cortex followed by medulla. And this medulla comprises of certain cells which are found to be polyhedral, and they are stained with chromic acid and give brown color. As they are stained with chromic acid, these cells of the adrenal medulla are called as chromaffin cells. Okay, so what is the takeaway from this part? It is that the cells of adrenal medulla are called as dash. They are chromaffin cells. Why they are called as chromaffin cells? Because they are stained with chromic acid. This is the first thing you have to remember. Next, coming to the adrenal medullary hormones. These are called as catecholamines, and these are nothing but biological amines which we are referring to from the day one of this endocrinology class, because they are derived from an amino acid, that is tyrosine, and hence these are called as biological amines or derivatives of amino acid. And these are represented by mainly two hormones. One is epinephrine, also called as adrenaline. Second one is norepinephrine or noradrenaline. Okay, and the noradrenaline is also called as levoterenol. Levoterenol, and to some extent, adrenal medulla also secretes a third hormone called as dopamine. Okay, but whenever we speak about adrenal medulla, we speak about only these two, epinephrine and norepinephrine, also called as adrenaline and noradrenaline respectively. And these are found from the amino acids tyrosine and phenylalanine by enzymatic actions involving two reactions, hydroxylation and decarboxylation. First of all, what happens is phenylalanine being catalyzed by the enzyme phenylalanine hydroxylase is converted to tyrosine, which is again hydroxylated by tyrosine hydroxylase to produce dopamine, dopa simply. And it gets decarboxylated, that means removal of carbon dioxide, under the enzymatic action of aromatic L-amino acid decarboxylase, so that it is converted to dopamine. And dopamine is under the influence of the enzyme being catalyzed by dopamine beta oxidase. It is converted to norepinephrine. That means norepinephrine is the first hormone that is produced in this pathway, which in the presence of phenylalanine and methyl transferase is converted to form epinephrine. So norepinephrine gives rise to epinephrine. So these are direct descendants of the amino acid tyrosine. But actually tyrosine is derived from phenylalanine. Hence we say that these are derived from tyrosine and phenylalanine. Okay. And coming to the response of these catecholamines, there are two receptors involved here, alpha and beta. The alpha receptor in the cells respond more to norepinephrine, whereas epinephrine, when epinephrine is secreted, it can bind to both alpha as well as beta receptors. So, epinephrine is non-specific with respect to these two, whereas norepinephrine is specific to alpha receptor. Okay. And these beta receptors are of three types: beta 1, beta 2, and beta 3. Once the hormone binds to the beta receptor, whatever it may be, 1 or 2 or 3, it leads to the formation of breakdown of ATP in the presence of adenylyl cyclase, so that cyclic AMP is produced. And here this acts as the second messenger in cells for further regulation of the cellular activity. Whereas coming to the alpha receptors, instead of CAMP, directly CAMP is to be activated. Here alpha 2 receptors bind to inhibitory G protein, thereby the action is mediated by decreased CAMP in the cells. Okay, and here CAMP is increased because we already have discussed about signal transduction. G protein has two subunits, alpha, beta, gamma. Alpha is said to be two types: alpha stimulatory, alpha inhibitory. And here it binds to inhibitory G protein, inhibitory alpha unit of G protein, so that CAMP levels are decreased. Whereas alpha 1 receptors are coupled with phosphatidyl inositol. We already have discussed all about all this. You can refer to the signal transduction PPT or the recorded class that I have posted previously. That's why I'm not stressing on this. And this action is mediated by diacylglycerol and inositol phosphate 3 IP3, where these two act as the second messengers in place of cyclic AMP. This is how these two hormones are what we call their activities are said to be uh, controlled. And coming to fast, the epinephrine, which is also called as adrenaline. Epinephrine content of the resting gland is about 0.1 milligrams percentage of its moist weight. This question will not be asked in the examination. Leave about it. Total store in both glands is about 10 mg in human beings, especially man. And this is also not asked in the examination. So what they ask in the examination is epinephrine is a tyrosine derivative. This is only for information sake I have put here. Epinephrine is a tyrosine derivative. We already seen the pathway where epinephrine is produced, that is the end product in tyrosine metabolism. And the second one is epinephrine is a sympathomimetic hormone. Here, mimetic means it is derived from a term called as mime. What is mime? When you what we call దాన్ని ఏమంటారు మనం అనుకరిస్తాం కదా ఎవరైనా మాట్లాడితే వాళ్ళలాగా మాట్లాడడం. So that is what we call it as miming. So mimicry. Okay. And here there are certain compounds in the body. One behaves as the other one. There is A, there is B, and B acts as A. Then we call this a particular compound as a mimetic compound. And here epinephrine is a sympathomimetic hormone. When we study the nervous system, we study nervous system into three parts: central nervous system, peripheral nervous system, and autonomous nervous system. Autonomous nervous system, we again divide it into sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system. Here in both cases, the term sympathetic is used. And here in these, what happens is at the nerve index, there is a chemical substance like acetylcholine is released, and that is referred to as sympathin. Okay, and epinephrine, that means adrenaline, is almost similar in activity with respect to sympathin. Hence, we call it as sympathomimetic hormone. That means it exerts the same effect as sympathetic stimulation in the body. There are different actions attributed to adrenaline. So leave about all this. I'll just uh, give you a small idea of both these hormones in nutshell. When actually adrenaline and noradrenaline are released. You already have heard about that. These are called as 3F hormones and 4S hormones. Though you know, let me explain you once again. So what is the 3F hormones? Both these hormones are released in three different what we call activities of the body. One is called as flight activity, the other is called as fight activity, and the other is called as fright activity. Okay, so these are the three activities. Flight means we move away from that place. Fight means we fight, we don't move and we fight with the opponent. And fright means we get frightened, we get fearful. And in these three circumstances, adrenaline or noradrenaline are said to be released. Okay, so what actually happens is there is a movie uh, called as Incockado. When you, if you have leisure time, you can watch on YouTube. Incockado. This movie depends on this particular adrenaline hormone. The entire movie runs on this aspect only, where the adrenaline is just taken as a what we call gas, and it pumps up the entire body and he gets enormous energy. So how this takes place? There is an opponent coming towards you. So if he is big, what you can do, you can just fly away from that place, for which you require energy, isn't it? Second thing, if you are strong enough and the opponent is coming, what you can do, instead of going away, you can fight with him, for which also you require energy. And the third one is frightened. When you get fear, then also your body metabolism increases and you require energy. So in all these three cases, the common point is energy. So how energy is produced? Energy is produced by the oxidation of glucose. So when glucose is oxidized, it produces carbon dioxide, water, and energy. So the main purpose of these hormones to increase glucose oxidation in the cells. So this is a cell. How the glucose oxidation increases? Only when glucose is present. So what this hormone has to do is, it has to increase the supply of glucose through blood vessels to the respective cell. So in order to get energy, glucose has to be oxidized, for which the primary requisite is the transport of glucose to that cell. And this is accomplished by what? Affecting or controlling the blood vessel. That means here the blood flow has to increase so that glucose can be transported there. But the blood flow has to increase means here the heart rate or the blood pressure has to increase. So indirectly, in order to increase the oxidation of glucose, it has to act upon the blood pressure. The second thing is, this is the cell. It requires not only this but also oxygen. That means oxygen has to be supplied, for which again here oxygen has to be transported through the blood flow only. So along with glucose, when blood pressure rises, what happens? Here the glucose and oxygen are transported to the cells so that glucose oxidation may take place. Okay, so this is the primary activity of the uh, adrenaline and epinephrine hormones. So that what happens here, there is these two are involved in regulation of the activity of the blood vessels by a process called as vasomotion. So vaso refers to vessels, blood vessels. Motion means their activity. So here it is of two types. One is called as vasoconstriction, vasoconstriction. The other is called as vasodilation. So this is the normal blood vessel. Its diameter is said to be, let us say, it is 1 mm. What happens when vasoconstriction takes place or when vasodilation takes place? In constriction, when it takes place, the diameter still decreases. Let's say it is decreased to 0.5 mm. When dilation takes place, the diameter increases to, say, for example, 2 mm. So in constriction, the diameter of the blood vessel decreases, and in dilation, the diameter of the blood vessel increases. When the diameter of the blood vessel decreases, what happens? The blood pressure increases. The rate of flow of blood increases. When the vasodilation takes place, how? By increasing the diameter of the blood vessel, the rate of the flow of the blood decreases. So these hormones are involved in regulating the vasomotor activity. One by vasoconstriction, the other by vasodilation. In morning class, I've told you about two types of hormones, synergistic hormones and antagonistic hormones. Synergistic hormones, that means there are two hormones which are having same action, like glucocorticoids and glucagon. There are antagonistic hormones where there are two hormones which work opposite to each other. For example, insulin against glucagon. Now, there are two more hormones which are antagonistic in nature, adrenaline and noradrenaline, or epinephrine or norepinephrine. So these are the hormones which are antagonistic. Why they have to be antagonistic in nature? Because here let us say the blood flow due to vasoconstriction is increased. When the blood flow increases, what happens? Ultimately, the rate of beat of the heart, that means heart rate or heartbeat also increases. Continuously, if the heart beats for more than, for example, for every minute there are 70 to 80 beats per minute, on an average 72 or 75. If this is increased due to vasoconstriction to 82, what happens? The heart muscles get weakened. It may result in heart attack also. So vasoconstriction should always be followed by vasodilation so that it comes to normalcy. In order to bring the body metabolism to normalcy, at the same time the rate of blood flow to the normalcy, if adrenaline increases the blood flow by vasoconstriction, noradrenaline decreases blood flow by vasodilation. Okay, and don't think that adrenaline is always involved in increasing it and noradrenaline decreasing. No, at one place, for example at heart level, if adrenaline is said to be increasing and noradrenaline is said to be decreasing, at other place, maybe at the level of the kidney, opposite. Noradrenaline is involved in vasoconstriction and adrenaline is involved in vasodilation. So both of these are said to be antagonistic to each other, and both can function in the same way. Okay, and one more thing is, when energy is produced because of all these activities, energy is produced ultimately by the oxidation of glucose, and this energy utilized for work. No work is 100% efficient, so some amount of it is evolved as heat. When heat is evolved in order to cool the body, sweating also occurs. That is the reason why when these hormones are said to be functioning, there is associated with it, there is increased BMR, increased heat in the body, and increased sweating. When you fight there is sweating. When you flight, there is when you fly away, there is sweating, and when you get frightened, also there is sweating. This is the reason behind this. Now you can understand all these aspects of the functions of the adrenaline easily. So what happens when adrenaline is released? It increases the heart rate. It increases the force of the output of heart. Okay. So what is cardiac output? The amount of blood that comes out of the heart per beat is called as stroke volume. Okay. And in about a minute, it amounts to the about 5 liters. When we deal with circulatory system, we'll deal with it. So this is what I call it as cardiac output. When the rate of flow of blood increases, when the heart rate increases, what happens? Automatically the cardiac output also increases. And how it is increased? It is increased by increasing the excitability of the muscles of the heart. We know muscles of the heart is said to be having its own wall, having epicardium, mesocardium, myocardium. The mesocardium or myocardium has cardiac muscles. In addition to this, there is bundle of his which is supplied to the ventricles, so that ventricles are contracted. And now, here under the influence of the adrenaline, excitability of myocardium takes place, and also conduction of bundle of his is increased. Next, the third function is it is involved in vasoconstriction of all blood vessels except the blood vessel that supplies to the heart, called as coronary blood vessel. Coronary artery is the blood vessel that supplies blood to the heart, and those that supply to the skeletal muscles. Except these two, all other blood vessels are said to be constricted. So, because of constriction, what happens? Systolic blood pressure rises, and opposite to this, diastolic blood pressure may fall. When we systolic minus diastolic blood pressure, then we get mean arterial pressure. Ultimately, this is more and this is less, so that mean arterial pressure increases. At the same time, the breakdown of glucose, that means what we call oxidation of glucose takes place, which increases the respiratory quotient. And for this, blood has to be supplied. In order to supply blood, glycogen has to be broken down, and glucose has to be found from non-carbohydrate sources. That means adrenaline also enhances glycogenolysis process as well as gluconeogenesis process. That means all the process related to glucose release, blood uh, glucose transport, and finally glucose oxidation are under the control of these hormones. And it also promotes Cori cycle, because in skeletal muscle, whenever if the skeletal muscle continuously works, what happens? Glucose is broken down to pyruvic acid. If enough oxygen is not supplied to the muscles during exercise, pyruvic acid is converted to lactic acid. So now this lactic acid has again to be converted to glucose, which is said to be explained by a Nobel Award winner. She's a lady. She's called as Cori, and thus Cori cycle is said to be promoted, so that glucose is said to be produced from lactic acid by another mechanism. And it decreases urine volume, it increases basal metabolic rate, and sweating is also induced. So these are the what we call consequences when adrenaline is released. Coming to the norepinephrine or noradrenaline, it is also called as levartirinol, and hence certain books say that adrenaline is called as artirinol because it is called as levartirinol. Okay, and it is also called as levofed, and it is the immediate precursor of epinephrine. We already have seen norepinephrine is first produced from tyrosine, and norepinephrine gives rise to epinephrine. Okay, except for few instances, the actions of epinephrine and norepinephrine are very similar. So, though all that we have seen are said to be attributed to norepinephrine also. It is also supposed to be the actual sympathetic transmitter produced at the endings of the adrenergic fibers. So, norepinephrine is the chemical substance that is released at the nerve endings. Axons are called as nerve fibers, and at the nerve endings, the chemical that is released is said to be sympathin, and this sympathin is nothing but norepinephrine. So norepinephrine and epinephrine are having same functions. Hence, epinephrine is also called previously as sympathomimetic uh, compound. Okay. So these are the different activities of the epinephrine and non-epinephrine. So when just I will explain one or two, then you this entire PPT will be shared with you. You can go through this, and you can ask me if you have any doubt. I'm coming to the heart. Epinephrine is involved in increasing, and antagonistic hormone norepinephrine is involved in decreasing, opposite to it. Okay, and at the same time, when compared with each other, if it increases, it has to decrease. But the increasing capacity of norepinephrine is said to be very low when compared with epinephrine. That is what you have to take away here. And coming to the cardiac output, epinephrine increases cardiac output. Norepinephrine is not having any change. With respect to systolic blood pressure, both are involved in increasing it. And diastolic pressure, epinephrine is said to be almost decreases or it has no change, whereas norepinephrine is increasing. And finally, what actually happens is the mean arterial pressure in both cases is said to be increased. In case of blood vessels, epinephrine is said to be vasodilator for certain muscles, as we have seen, skeletal muscle, and for all others, it is constrictor, vasoconstrictor. Whereas norepinephrine is entirely, that means even in skeletal muscles, it is entirely constricted, vasoconstrictor. And coming to respiration, both increase or stimulate respiration so that respiratory rate increases, amount of oxygen that is applied to the cells also increases, so that oxidation of glucose takes place. And these are the other activities you can refer to later. And before concluding this, would like to mention one thing, that these hormones are also called as 4S hormones. Not only 3F hormones, they are called as 4S hormones. So here some books refer to this, but actually it is not scientific. No reference book like Guyton or Medical Physiology or some other books refer to it. In some general books it is referred, so that in some examinations this is also asked. That's why I'm mentioning here. So there are four S's here. The first S here refers to sugar. Okay. The second S refers to salt. Okay, that means sodium here. And the third S refers to stress. And the fourth S refers to sexual urge. Okay, so leaving about all this, what actually happens when epinephrine or norepinephrine are released? It is involved in oxidation of glucose. That means it regulates sugar metabolism. That is one case, or controls. Second one is salt. What is salt here? We get sweating, isn't it? When we get sweating, what happens? Certain amounts of salts are said to be lost. So they say it is also involved in this one. And the third one is stress. Both epinephrine and norepinephrine are considered as stress reliever hormones. They're called as stress reliever hormones. Why? Because three of fight, flight, or flight. That means these hormones are released whenever you get frightened. So that energy is said to be released, and the metabolism is said to be brought to normal or something like that happens, so that you are stressed due to frightening. is said to be fear is said to be decreased, and hence these are also called as stress reliever hormones by certain scientists. So this refers to S, and this is also involved in what we call increasing the sexual urge of the individual. And so far, we have not seen any disorder related to the hypo or hyperfunctioning of adrenal medulla. So, what are the disorders we have seen only are with respect to the hypo or hyperfunction of adrenal cortex only, not with respect to adrenal medulla. So, there is no disorder associated with it. And I would like to conclude this entire endocrinology session with the control of endocrine system. So there is a concept called as myelo-interior. Okay, myelo-interior. This is proposed by Claude Bernard. According to this, myelo-interior means internal environment. Myelo means environment. According to Claude Bernard, internal environment of the cell or of the body has to be maintained constant. We know our body temperature is 37 degrees centigrade or 98.4 degrees Fahrenheit. When you get 99 degrees, that means just zero point 0.6 degrees of temperature is increased, and you say that you got fever. One more degree, just 1.6, you say it is high fever. One more degree, 1.101 or 102, 103, you say it is lethal. That means your body temperature should not be beyond or below 37 degrees centigrade. It has to be maintained constant. And at the same time, the cell and its environment, internal environment, also has to be maintained always constant, because the cell requires glucose every time. That means here glucose has to be supplied through the blood. So the blood has to maintain 90 mg per 100 ml of glucose every second you live. So wherever you come across with body fluids or anything, it has to be maintained constant. That is what myelo-interior constancy as proposed by Claude Bernard is. This is accomplished by ionic regulation, osmoregulatory mechanisms. And these mechanisms come under a term coined by Walter Cannon as homeostasis. And homeostasis is achieved by the integration of the nervous system and also the endocrine system, which we call it as neuroendocrine integration. And thus, endocrine system is also responsible for maintaining the intracellular environment constant, a process called as homeostasis. And this is accomplished in two ways. One is negative feedback control or mechanism, the other is positive feedback control or mechanism. Simply, we can see this as like this. There is one, A stimulates B, and B stimulates the formation of C, but increased formation of C inhibits B. There is a hormone, parathermone. This hormone, how it is secreted? By parathyroid gland. So, parathyroid gland secretes parathermone. What does it do? It increases the blood calcium level. Now, the increased blood calcium level influences parathermone. That means this is the basal level, and your calcium levels have fallen down. As soon as they have fallen down, what happens? They stimulate the parathyroid so that parathermone is secreted. it leads to decalcification of the bone, and calcium ions are released, and it is brought to normalcy. If parathermone still exists for some more time, the calcium level may increase, isn't it? So that should not be the case. The basal level has to be maintained. So whenever it increases, it stimulates the parathyroid gland in negative way, so that it stops secreting parathermone. That is what we call it as negative feedback mechanism. One increases, that means here calcium ion levels increased, that decreases the parathermal level. If calcium ion levels decrease, that increases the parathermal levels. In both the way, they are working opposite to each other with a negative impact, either to decrease or to increase. Hence, we call it as negative feedback mechanism. This is the simple definition for this. Opposite to this, there is a positive feedback mechanism. Here, A stimulates B, and B stimulates formation of C, that means a hormone. And this hormone now, instead of negative impact, it is having a positive impact, so that B is stimulated again to secrete more and more quantities of this hormone. For example, there is a hormone called as prolactin. So how prolactin is released? Prolactin is released by the pituitary gland. Who stimulates pituitary gland? It is the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus is said to be related to the brain. So who stimulates brain? Hypothalamus. It is the neural impulse. What is the neural impulse here? It is the suckling impulse of the baby. So when the baby starts drinking milk by sucking the what we call mammary glands, that suckling impulse is transmitted via the mammary glands through the nerves to the hypothalamus, so that it starts secreting prolactin releasing hormone, which stimulates what we call the pituitary gland, which starts secreting prolactin. And this prolactin now reached what we call it reached the optimum level. Now what happens if prolactin exists? Its level may increase. In that case, the suckling impulse will continue. So what should actually happen here? The suckling impulse should continue, and milk secretion should be continued until the baby's hunger is said to be completed. So whenever it increases in other hormones, what happens? There is a negative feedback mechanism, so that the prolactin level secretion is said to be stopped. And here, this is not the case. The increased prolactin further stimulates the entire process, so that the prolactin secretion is increased, and which we call it as a positive feedback mechanism. That is what also happens during the delivery of the baby, that is oxytocin. Oxytocin, once released, it is responsible for the contraction of the smooth muscles of the wall of the uterus. Uterus have three layers: epimetrium, mesometrium, and myometrium, endometrium. So mesometrium is having these smooth muscles. So the smooth muscles are present in the middle layer of the uterus. So oxytocin, once released, it stimulates this. So after contraction, what happens? Delivery of the baby should take place immediately, but it will not take place immediately. It takes so much time. That means the contraction waves of the smooth muscle should be persistent. So once the oxytocin released, it keeps on stimulating. How? Because it keeps on getting secreted. And these are the mechanisms which we call them as positive feedback mechanism. Except this, all other hormones are said to be controlled by negative feedback mechanism only. And negative feedback mechanism we can exemplify: insulin, glucagon, parathyroid, just have discussed thyrocalcitonin, okay, and partly aldosterone also, where endocrine gland stimulates target cell, so that this secretes a hormone which stimulates the target cell. And now what happens? This target cell now, the hormone that is secreted by the target cell now inhibits the secretion of the same by inhibiting the endocrine gland activity. And here we are referring to two things, A and A1. These are not related to negative feedback mechanism at all. These are different factors. It can be environmental, it can be any other thing. One has an impact on endocrine gland, the other has an impact on target cell. Okay, so this is negative feedback mechanism, and where the hormone that is secreted by the target cell influences the endocrine gland, so that the concentration of the hormones, if it is decreased, this increases. If it is increased, this decreases. Thus, it is an example for negative feedback mechanism. At the same time, both endocrine gland and target cell are said to be also under the control of other factors. They are also under the control of other factors, not just each mutually inhibiting or promoting their behavior. And another complex feedback system we can see, as we have just explained with respect to prolactin, there is another hormone called as trophic hormones. So anterior pituitary secretes all trophic hormones. Let's say, what is that hormone? Thyroid stimulating hormone or thyrotrophic hormone. It stimulates what? An endocrine gland, thyroid. So TSH stimulates thyroid. Okay. So this thyroid gland produces a hormone that stimulates the target cell. So this hormone is said to be T4 thyroxine, and this thyroxine level, whenever it increases, it may it may act upon thyroid stimulating hormone, so that thyroxine secretion is said to be stopped. But actually, thyroid stimulating hormone is under the control of thyroid stimulating hormone releasing hormone, which is again under the control of nervous system, that is hypothalamus. Thus, T4 hormone not only can inhibit TSH, it also can have a negative feedback effect on the hypothalamus. Thus, on both at this place and at this place, here the T4 that is released is said to be controlling in a negative way. And here A1, A2, A3, they refer to the other factors. For T4, for example, T4 to be secreted, thyroxine, what is required? Iodine is required. If here we consider this is endocrine gland, thyroid gland, it has to produce T4 which acts on the target cell. For the thyroxine to be produced in the thyroid gland, what is required? Iodine is required. If the iodine is not supplied, even though there is TSH, even though there is TSH releasing hormone, there is no secretion of T4 at all, because there is an external factor, iodine, operating here. So at each level there are other factors controlling the system also. Okay, and one more example, which is a deviation from the normal mechanism, is regulation of aldosterone. Here there is one organ which secretes an enzyme. There is another organ which secretes a precursor of the aldosterone. That is, we call it as hormonogen. And this enzyme cleaves the hormonogen so that hormone is secreted. And that hormone is now involved in inducing the endocrine gland, that is adrenal cortex, so that aldosterone is secreted and it acts upon the target cell. And here again, the target cell and endocrine gland are said to be under the influence of some external factors also. So this is how, by negative and positive feedback mechanisms, here the control of the hormones takes place. When the control of the hormones takes place, what actually happens is the target cell is controlled. What the target cell does, whenever a hormone is released in the target cell, there is a metabolic activity taking place. So, if hormone releases, metabolism takes place. If hormone does not release, metabolism will not take place. Thus, the secretion of the hormones or non-secretion of the hormones is related to the regulation of metabolism, which actually is the crux of homeostatic mechanism. Thus, along with the nervous system, endocrine system is also considered for maintaining the internal environment constant. So with this, we come to the end of endocrinology. Any doubts you can ask me, otherwise we'll close here.